In 1979, Iran's revolution promised freedom, but within months, women were being publicly whipped in the streets. When Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile, millions welcomed him as a hero, but almost immediately, he began reversing women's rights, lowering the marriage age to 9, removing female judges, and declaring that women must cover their hair. And then the punishments began. Public lashings, street patrols, arrests for showing hair. How did a revolution that promised dignity turn into a system where women could be jailed, beaten, or even executed for moral corruption? And why did it happen so fast? Only weeks after taking power, Ruhollah Khomeini made a decision that would change daily life for millions of women. On March 7, 1979, he announced that women working in government offices must wear the Islamic hijab. He said that uncovered hair was immoral and described it as a form of nakedness. This was not presented as a recommendation. It was a direct order from the highest authority in the country. The effects were immediate. Government offices began turning women away if they arrived without a head covering. Some were told to go home and not return unless they followed the new rule. The timing of what happened next was powerful. On March 8th, thousands of women gathered in the streets of Tehran. What brought them together was a shared feeling that the revolution they had supported was now limiting their freedom. They marched without hijab, fully aware that they were defying a new order. They carried signs and chanted slogans, demanding the right to choose how they dressed. It was the first large public protest against the new Islamic Republic. Revolutionary guards and pro-regime groups moved in to confront the demonstrators. They shouted threats and, in some areas, fired warning shots into the air to scatter the crowds. But the protests did not end that day. For 6 days, from March 8th to March 14th, women continued returning to the streets. For a short time, officials announced that the rule would not be strictly enforced. To many women, this felt like proof that public pressure could still make a difference. However, the pause did not mean the policy had changed. It only meant the government was waiting. Once the protests faded and attention shifted elsewhere, hardliners inside the regime reorganized. By 1980, enforcement returned with stronger measures and fewer limits. The struggle over the hijab was no longer just about clothing. It had become a test of power between the state and the women who had hoped the revolution would protect their rights. After the hijab protests, the new authorities moved quickly to show they were in control. These groups had wide power and almost no oversight. Their task was to enforce Islamic codes of behavior, and women were often among the first to face punishment. Actions that had not been crimes just months earlier suddenly became serious offenses. Being alone with a man outside marriage, attending a mixed gathering, drinking alcohol, or showing too much hair could now lead to arrest. Within weeks of the hijab decree, public punishments began. An early case was reported on March 19th in the newspaper Kayhan. In the northern city of Rudsar, a married woman with 3 children was accused of running away with another man. A revolutionary court sentenced her to 50 lashes and the man to 100 for what the judge called an illegitimate relationship. The flogging was carried out in the street in front of onlookers. Similar reports followed. In Esfahan, 3 people were publicly whipped after being accused of having an affair. They were beaten in public view and forced to repent before being released. These were not isolated cases. Public humiliation became part of enforcement. Revolutionary guards and local committees patrolled streets and neighborhoods. Young couples were stopped for sitting too close together. People accused of drinking or hosting mixed parties were detained. The message was clear. Moral rules would now be enforced by force. By the end of 1979, Ruhollah Khomeini had shaped the country into a system guided by strict religious law. Revolutionary courts issued thousands of sentences. Political opponents were imprisoned or executed, but many ordinary women faced lashes or jail for behavior labeled immoral. Women watched how they walked and how they dressed. Families warned daughters to avoid attention. Khomeini sometimes criticized punishments he considered excessive. In 1980, after a stoning case in Kerman province, he reportedly told judges to stop issuing stoning sentences. But this did not mean the system itself changed. Floggings, arrests, and moral prosecutions continued across the country. Restraint, when it appeared, was limited. The structure of control remained in place. In July 1980, women entering government offices without a head covering were stopped at the door. For women who depended on their jobs, refusal meant unemployment. In 1981, the policy expanded beyond state buildings. Hijab became mandatory in all public spaces. Officers began stopping women to inspect clothing. By 1983, the punishment was formally defined in criminal law. A woman who appeared in public without proper hijab could be sentenced to up to 74 lashes. At the same time, strict punishments for sexual behavior were restored. Charges such as adultery or moral corruption carried heavy flogging sentences and, in some cases, execution. Thousands of people were sentenced in the early 1980s, with women facing constant scrutiny because of how visible dress and behavior were in public. The law now supported what street patrols had already begun. The system that enforced these laws moved quickly. Revolutionary judges, many appointed directly under Khomeini's authority, often issued sentences within days. Defendants had little protection. In remote areas, stoning quietly returned. In 1986, a woman known publicly as Soraya Manuchehri was accused of adultery in a village court. Under pressure and intimidation, she was sentenced to death by stoning. Her story later became known internationally through the book and film, The Stoning of Soraya M. Even when punishment stopped short of execution, the effects were severe. Sentences of hundreds of lashes caused lasting physical damage. For many Iranian women, the memory of those early years did not fade. The fear did not always need to be visible. It had already been woven into routine life.